Welcome to our special here on the First TV, the Supreme Court under attack. So we're all in agreement here that the left hates Donald Trump. We're good here. No need to articulate how. But why? Why do they hate him so much? They used to love him. Why do they hate him so much now? They'll never forgive him for beating Hillary in 2016. He stopped history from happening. The coronation of Hillary Clinton from First Lady to President of the United States, they denied them the first female president. Donald Trump denied them. Now, that's bad enough, but that is not Trump's legacy to these people on the left. Beating Hillary was enough to make them vow to destroy him and take down the whole country in the process. Right? After he beat Hillary, they decided right then and there to be for everything he was against and against everything he was for. You look no further than COVID to see that in action and the lengths that the left was willing to go to take down Trump. They would destroy the country in the process, not even feel bad about him. But still, that's not their legacy of Donald Trump beating Hillary. What still haunts their dreams every day is not just beating Hillary, it is putting 3 conservatives on the Supreme Court. Oh, I would have loved to have been at that lunch. What lunch? Back in 2013, President Obama had a nice little lunch with a one Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was 80 at the time, and the objective of the lunch was to try to convince the oldest member of the Supreme Court and 2-time cancer patient to say, hey, Ruth, maybe it's time you step down from the court so that I and the Democrats can put someone else in to continue your legacy. I don't know how that went down at the lunch, but it didn't work. And it wasn't just Obama. Many other Democrats tried to get her to resign just the same. Say, hey, Ruth, we might lose the Senate. We may not be able to put in another feminist icon like you. You got to go now so we can continue your legacy. But she didn't do it. She refused to leave. I don't know why. We'll never know why. Maybe it's because she thought Hillary was going to win. At least that's what the Democrats said to themselves. Like, well, listen, we'd prefer you to resign now while we control the Senate. But okay, Hillary will win in 2016, and we'll have one feminist icon replace the old feminist icon with another future feminist icon, and all will be well in the progressive utopian world. But then, Orange Man entered the scene and not only denied Hillary history, but was able to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg with Neil Gorsuch, not who they had in mind, and then put in Brett Kavanaugh, and then, worst of all, the opposite of feminist icon Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Amy Coney Barrett, a woman with 7 children. Do you remember when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died? And maybe even still today, if you go to like a Barnes & Noble, you go to a big national bookstore, the entire kids section was Ruth Bader Ginsburg books. All books about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the notorious RBG. I don't know if there's any kids books about Amy Coney Barrett. Real quick, because I mentioned Kavanaugh, I'll never forget. We should almost do a special on this just to relive this. The hysteria. It was the greatest freakout I've ever seen. The greatest political freakout ever was when Donald Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh. Never forget the absolute gong show freakout that happened with that. And only Trump could have weathered that storm on behalf of Kavanaugh. Go back to 2016 as well. There were a lot of Republicans who were skeptical of Trump, didn't know about this guy. But in the end, they decided to hold their nose and vote for Trump because of the Supreme Court. That was the justification they gave themselves, the permission they gave themselves to vote for Trump and keep Hillary out, was because we got to make sure we keep justices on the Supreme Court. We put conservative justices on the court. And that worked out well. I remember that being a major talking point back in 2016. And I think it needs to be talked about again. No one's talking about the Supreme Court anymore, the next 4 years of it. But Clarence Thomas is 76. Sam Alito's 74. The others are late 60s, and then the newer ones are in their 50s. But you never know. 2 of our best conservative justices are in their 70s. We've got to make sure we put another conservative in there. I think that's a great reason to keep Kamala out of the White House, to make sure a Kamala appointment never hits the court. So I think that same justification that a lot of people used in 2016 to vote for Trump should be used again in 2024, but I don't hear anyone saying that. Now, if it's up to the Democrats, they're not going to leave it up to chance anymore. They're not going to leave it up to the president anymore. They want to entirely change the court in total. They're not going to wait and make sure that there's a Democratic president anymore. So they've come up with other ways to pack the court or unpack the court. We'll talk about all those different methods that they're testing, that they're trying, and that they will do if they get the opportunity to do it. They want to pack the court, take the court from 9 to 13 members or even more. They also want to unpack the court. They do that by making up phony ethics problems to try and force justices to recuse themselves, specifically Clarence Thomas. The scandals couldn't be more ridiculous. I'll just give you one of them. We have this headline here that Clarence Thomas received a Super Bowl ring from Jerry Jones. Now, there's no case that Jerry Jones has in front of the court, so I don't even know why it would result in a recusal anyway, but it was just a gift. But they made this big deal. Oh, the diamond Super Bowl ring, it's worth $80,000. Oh, it's unbelievable. And that went on for a long time before people kind of finally came around and said, well, hold on. It wasn't a real Super Bowl ring. It turned out to be a replica ring. It's not worth $80,000. It's worth something like $50. But whatever. They'll just lie. Do you remember Sam Alito's wife put the appeal to heaven flag outside the front of their property? Heaven forbid. The flag that George Washington used in the Continental Army. Appeal to heaven from John Locke's second treatise of government. He must recuse himself. So today's special, we're going to go over Kamala's proposal to pack the court to their favor, of course. They also want term limits. Now, that's an interesting one. Are term limits a good idea? Now, it's interesting, and we'll talk about that because I've never heard that idea before. Of all their proposals, they never talk about why it's a good idea. They never say, oh, well, we need term limits because. They don't say that. It's just assumed. Their followers know. It's because Trump is Hitler. And the court, as it currently is a major roadblock for them. It's a roadblock for them, killing babies and other bad things. So I'm curious, why did the founders make the court the way it is? Why did they make it a lifetime appointment, for instance? Why did they not? I'm sure they talked about it. So why didn't they do it that way? So we'll go over all that today. For the record, here's what Neil Gorsuch said about these so-called reforms.
It is that the independent judiciary means, what does it mean to you as an American? It means that when you're unpopular, you can get a fair hearing under the law and under the Constitution. If you're in the majority, you don't need judges and juries to hear you and protect your rights. You're popular. It's there for the moments when the spotlight's on you, when the government's coming after you. And don't you want a ferociously independent judge and a jury of your peers to make those decisions? Isn't that your right as an American? And so I just say, be careful.
That's the man who replaced Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That's the reason why they hate Trump so much. These Democrats, these progressives, do not believe in the Constitution, not a word of it. The First Amendment is the freedom of speech. Here's Tim Walz on that topic.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
Yeah, that's what you're up against. Vote accordingly and get everyone you know to vote accordingly as well. We'll talk about their Supreme Court reforms and their general attack on the Supreme Court next, right here on the First TV. Hey, welcome back to our special attack on the Supreme Court. William Jacobson is here. He is a professor at Cornell Law School and also the founder of the website Legal Insurrection, which you should make part of your daily viewing. Professor, how are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Why do so many people on the left, in your opinion, want to attack the Supreme Court as it is?
it's fairly obvious it is an institution they no longer control. If the court were ruling the way they want the court to rule, none of this would be going on. So this is really a purely political, it's not really principled attack on the court. They're upset that there is a 6-3 conservative majority that is likely to stay in place for a number of years, maybe even decades. And it is something that they view as stymieing their plans, and therefore they want to destroy what they can't control.
It's as simple as that. If Ruth Bader Ginsburg were 50, I don't think they'd be talking about term limits, for instance.
That's right.
Actually, we have a clip here of Joe Biden talking about the court.
Tens of millions of people's debt was literally about to get canceled. But then some of my Republican friends and elected officials and special interests sued us, and the Supreme Court blocked us. But that didn't stop us. No, I mean it sincerely. We continue to find alternatives paths to reduce student debt payments.
That didn't stop us. What do we need to know about nullification or just in general defying the Supreme Court?
Well, this administration, I think, really uniquely has been brazen in its open defiance of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled against the student loans, ruled the president didn't have power, and he goes ahead and he does things anyway. And he's not shy about it. And I don't think that Kamala Harris would be shy about it either. I think we can expect that were she to be elected president. So this is a Democrat executive branch which does not recognize the limitations of its own power and does not recognize the authority of the Supreme Court when the Supreme Court issues a ruling it doesn't like. And that really is the problem here. And that's really a frightening prospect for a potential Harris administration, is that they will carry forward that same attitude of defiance of the Supreme Court that Joe Biden has.
What is one of the reforms that they proposed that troubles you the most?
Well, I think that it's probably the term limit. I mean, the reason that we have in the Constitution a life appointment for Supreme Court justices is to insulate them from the political process. Now, we all know that the selection process, the nomination process, has been politicized mostly by the Democrats dating back to Robert Bork nomination. And the concept of borking was created by people like Joe Biden to attack Republican nominees. But so the nomination process is always been political, at least since Bork. But the conduct of the court, the ability of the court to stay on the bench has not been subject to those political pressures. And that's why the framers of the Constitution put life tenure in for Supreme Court justices. And Joe Biden can't change that, and Chuck Schumer can't change that. They would have to do it by constitutional amendment, which they know they can't pass.
Oh, interesting. You're right. I didn't even think about that. Okay, but just for the sake of the academic argument, I've never heard this proposal before for term limits until just recently. So why did our founders not have term limits on the Supreme Court? Like, what's so bad about putting the politics of it aside and who would be in control of what? Because they say, oh, well, we'll have every new president put in whatever, it'd be like one justice every 2 years. So it would even out eventually or something over time. So what's wrong? Why did our founding fathers not put term limits on justices?
Well, if you look at the entirety of the constitutional structure, there are parts of the government that are highly subject to the popular whims. Mostly the House of Representatives comes up for election in its entirety every 2 years. But then there's the Senate, which is on more of a rolling 6-year basis. It's very hard to flip the Senate in any given election. And then there's the Supreme Court, which has life tenure. So there are various branches of government which have different pressures from the popular emotions of the day. And the court obviously felt that the one institution that should be most insulated, or I should say the founders obviously felt that the one institution that should be most insulated from the popular pressures is the Supreme Court. And I think that's why it's such a fundamental part of what we have.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. I want to go back, because this is a story that kind of just went away. The Dobbs, which is the repealing of Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs leak. And usually the court is so much better than that. What is your thoughts on that and just the general reputation of the court as it is right now?
Well, there has been a relentless campaign against the court by the Democrats and the media for many, many years now. And the Dobbs decision, the abortion decision, was a reflection of how that popular pressure has undermined the court. Unprecedented leak of a draft opinion from the court. I believe they know who did it, but they don't necessarily have enough proof of it to prosecute the person, or at least to name the person. And so I think that it has done tremendous pressure and damage to the court. Probably the only upside here is that I'm pretty sure the Congress has less favorability than even the Supreme Court. So you have people who have among the lowest favorability in the nation, meaning the people in Congress, putting pressure on another institution to try to bring it down. And it's really unseemly. So I think the court has been damaged by this. The court has been damaged by the leak. The court has been damaged by the protests outside justices' homes. The court has been damaged by people like Chuck Schumer standing on the steps of the court, threatening the justices that they will reap the whirlwind and they will not know what hit them. And I think that whole mainstream media, leftist activist, Democrat politician assault on the Supreme Court is definitely having an impact.
Yes, Professor Jacobson, founder of Legal Insurrection and law professor at Cornell University. That's such a good point. Maybe this is the one main point of this whole special today is to get this more in the popular conversation, that the fate of the court resides on this, not only on who will be put on the court, which was the deal in 2016, but if we lose this election, then the Democrats will want to just change the entire structure of the court itself forevermore. Fascinating. More next, right here on the First TV.
How much confidence do you have in the Supreme Court?
I think this is an activist court.
She thinks it's an activist court? Wait until we see the court that she puts in there. Let's go to our friend Josh Hammer. He's the host of the podcast America on Trial with Josh Hammer. Josh, how you doing, brother?
Doing well, Mike. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Can you express how much the AOCs of the country and the Kamalas of the country hate the Supreme Court?
So, look, let me first react to what Kamala Harris is saying here about the would-be activism of the current U.S. Supreme Court. There is a remarkable degree of complete illiteracy when it comes to the notion of judicial activism, judicial restraint, just generally how the judiciary ought to act, how it ought to comport itself in a given case or controversy before its desk. At some point, people start saying it was necessarily ipso facto, by very definition of the fact, it is somehow judicial activism to overturn a statute or to hold that a statute is incompatible with the Constitution or an executive order is incompatible with the Constitution or something like that. That is not judicial activism. That is the judicial duty. That is literally the whole point of the judicial power of which Article 3, Section 1, Clause 1 of the Constitution speaks. What is judicial activism is making up law from the bench. Now, making up law can take the form of either upholding a statute or striking down a statute or some other thing that I'm not thinking of right now. But it is judicial restraint, and judicial humility really is a term that I would probably prefer. Judicial humility is in actually upholding one's oath of office, which is what Marbury versus Madison requires, going back to the John Marshall masterpiece in 1803, which is saying that you have to abide by the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution, not any kind of statute or executive order or whatnot that is lower than that, but is actually in irreconcilable loggerheads in tension with the Constitution. So there was this tremendous confusion over what is judicial activism. If a judge says that a statute is unconstitutional, that is not in and of itself an act of judicial activism. If the statute actually is unconstitutional, that is just the judge doing what the judge has to do. So I wanted to kind of just get that out there. But, to your question, Mike, the left-wing assault on the U.S. Supreme Court has been going on for a number of years now. In fact, it was actually going all the way back to March or April of 2020, before Donald Trump was even out of office. There was this other abortion case down in Louisiana called June Medical Services. It was a law involving the radius with which a clinic has to have admitting privileges to a hospital, something along those lines there. And it was at that point that Chuck Schumer actually went on the steps of the U.S. Supreme Court, and he started lecturing the right of center justices. He said, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, you won't know what's going to happen to you if you rule the way that we don't prefer on this particular abortion case, June Medical, because as you and I both know, Mike, there is no holy or unholy sacrament, as the case may be, for the modern left other than the abortion sacrament. So this has been going on a long time now. It really, really started expediting, at least for me, in the aftermath of the leak of the Dobbs abortion opinion in May of 2022. That is when you had senators, congressmen egging on these protesters who were yelling and shouting in clear defiance of black letter U.S. criminal law on this topic outside of the justice homes, trying to get them to change their votes. You had the left-wing nut job, whose name I'm forgetting, fly from California to suburban Maryland to try to go assassinate Brett Kavanaugh. Dude had a firearm. He had a rope to try to, God forbid, lock up this and probably execute him execution style. Thank God police caught him at the last minute. This is a full-on, not just substantive assault on the Supreme Court, very much the echoes of 1937 FDR court packing. This is something even more vicious. I mean, this is coming from a deep personal level at this point. The Chuck Schumer and the Kavanaugh assassination examples, I think, are pretty clear indicators here. They hate these people, and they've always hated Clarence Thomas, going back to his judicial confirmation hearing way back in 1991 with Anita Hill, with Joe Biden, by the way, leading that charge from his Senate Judiciary Committee perch all those many years ago there. So they have hated the conservative elements of the U.S. Supreme Court for quite literally decades, going back at least as far as Bob Bork in 1987. But the difference is that in recent years is taking on a seriously dark and in many ways vicious undertone, I fear.
Very good. I've never seen the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings. That to me is the pinnacle of freak out in my political life, was watching that. It was unbelievable. Every day was crazy, unhinged, lunatic attacks. Like, who is it? The guy who used to be the Florida president, University of Florida president, Ben Sass. Ben Sass was in the elevator there. Like these activists were like in the elevator with them. It was like crazy. They hate these people, but you're right. It's like this deep obsession, hatred that they have. On to the policy, if I may. We just talked with Professor Jacobson from Cornell, and I asked him which of the reforms do you find most concerning? And he said it was the idea of term limits, and he spoke very eloquently about that. Is there another one of the reforms that Kamala Harris wants to impose that concerns you?
Well, I think that term limits probably are the most serious, egregious of the current floated reforms here. I mean, it's really court packing in any other name. I mean, it's kind of a watered down Diet Coke version of court packing, if you will. Look, the Constitution is extraordinarily clear on this. I mean, the Article 3 text says that federal judges on both the U.S. Supreme Court and any other lower courts that Congress may statutorily create, federal judges may sit, quote, during good behavior. And the phrase good behavior has been unanimously interpreted by every constitutional scholar, every constitutional lawyer, practitioner, judge, academic, you name it. Literally across the entire political, ideological spectrum, everyone agrees that during good behavior necessarily means life tenure. How do I know? Because they basically just say it in the Federalist Papers. It's really not a particularly hidden ball or anything. Hamilton, Madison, they're all extraordinarily clear about why they are giving life tenure to the justices. They want to shield them. They want to hide them from being directly accountable to the whims and caprices of the people, the hot passions of the people. It's one of the many counter-majoritarian checks that are woven into our constitutional fabric. Now, people may or may not agree with that on a policy matter. There are many states, including my state of Florida and my former state of Texas, that actually have fairly partisan elections. You might actually agree with that in theory. But the thing is, if you want to change that, you have to change the Constitution, because the text is very clear. You can't just pretend that the text does not say what it clearly says and then give this kind of like ridiculous, like campaign stump speech that you're going to do it. But, ultimately, Mike, what's going on here with this current iteration of the latest war on the U.S. Supreme Court, none of this is going to happen. I mean, none of it is going to happen right now. It is a pure 2024 presidential campaign gimmick by Joe Biden back then and now Kamala Harris today. They're just trying to gin up their left-wing base. That is the entire point of this broader information operation against the Supreme Court. That is the entire point of the now 2 years in a row of ProPublica, so-called investigative journalism that is trying to suss out anything that it can glom onto to try to point that Clarence Thomas and various conservative donors, Harlan Crow, have something in common there. None of this is about an actual conflict of interest. It is exclusively about the fact that they don't like the fact that there is one major institution in America that they do not single-handedly control. There is one institution, it's not even a right-wing court, but it is a center-right court for sure. I will happily acknowledge that. And they cannot get over the fact that there is one major institution that the wokerati do not exclusively control, and whether or not it is these so-called reforms which have no chance of passing, or whether or not it is the Clarence Thomas, Harlan Crow, ProPublica stuff. There was something in Political last year about how Neil Gorsuch allegedly profited too much from some real estate transaction in an LLC. It's garbage. It is all garbage. It is literally just coming from a place of utter jealousy that there is one major institution that they don't have their dirty talons all over.
And that is I totally agree with that. And that is the main objective of this special, is to put this court back in. I want it to backfire on them, right? If they're trying to use this to gin up their base, I want to use this to gin up our base and have another 2016 where we keep Hillary Clinton from nominating justices. I want to keep Kamala from nominating justices and make sure that none of these things that you're speaking of ever do get anywhere close to the light of day in any way. We only got about 30 seconds, but I remember hearing this, I don't know if this is true, but that Obama did not do a good job of nominating lower or appointing lower court justices. And then Trump came in and just filled this huge backlog. Is that true? / did Trump do a good job in naming judges from your opinion?
Well, Obama was more successful in some jurisdictions than others. So Obama took the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, for instance, which oversees Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and the Carolinas. He took the Fourth Circuit into the left's hands for a generation. I mean, to this day, the right is still playing catch up in the Fourth Circuit. But yeah, I mean, he left some wiggle room for Trump to take serious advantage in various other circuits. So the 11th Circuit, for instance, is now firmly right of center, whereas it wasn't. Even the 9th Circuit, the infamously liberal 9th Circuit out on the West Coast in California and whatnot, it's still center left, but it's much more in the middle now than it was when Obama left office. So it just depends. On the latter question, yeah, Trump did an exceptional job when it came to lower court judicial nominees. I mean, almost unanimously. I mean, there are a few picks who were excellent than others, if I'm really splitting hairs, and I can name names if we really want to. But, I clerked on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit for Judge James C. Ho, who's a Trump nominee. I was actually one of Judge Ho's first 4 law clerks. I mean, I saw the Fifth Circuit be transformed before my very eyes during my year clerking on that court. There are any number of other circuits that have been utterly transformed by Trump's picks. This is a crucial issue. We unfortunately live in a day and age of judicial supremacy where the courts really are ultimately the final arbiters of what is and is not correct in this country. That is not the way it was supposed to be. That's a rant for another day. But that unfortunately is the system that we currently live in. And accepting the playing field as it currently is, fighting on the current terrain that for better or for worse we have been given, it is our imperative to make sure we have as many sound constitutionalist conservative justices on all the lower courts as possible, obviously also including the U.S. Supreme Court itself.
Another reason to vote accordingly. Josh Hammer, America on Trial. That's the podcast. Look for it anywhere you listen to podcasts. Josh, great to talk to you, brother.
You bet, anytime.
The great Mark Paolota coming up next right here on the First TV. Spread the word.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
Wow, that was a turning point in all of this. That clip referenced by our last guest. I want to go right to Mark Paoletta. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Renewing America. Mark, how you doing, sir?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Griffith, here, let's talk about that guy, Chuck Schumer, and his proposed No Kings Act. What's the background with this?
Yeah, so it's good that you played that clip because, you know, all of this is the left's assault on the Supreme Court, literally threatening justices by name, in my view, with physical violence. And it's just been ratcheting up. That was in actually March of 2020, before Justice Barrett was appointed to the court. And the left has only become more unhinged since then. Most recently, there's two things. There's the Biden-Harris court packing plan, and then it's combined with one of the things that Biden proposed was this so-called No Kings Act, which now Schumer has introduced, I think, with 27 senators, Democrat senators. It wants to overturn the Supreme Court decision in Trump v. U.S., where Chief Justice Roberts, in a magisterial decision, said, of course, presidents have immunity for their official acts and sort of presumptively official acts as president, so that when they're done, they're not going to get prosecuted or sued by people. Like if you're, the executive power of the United States is vested in the president. And so, structurally, historically, textually, it supports immunity. And that's what the Roberts decision walks through. And so the left was unhinged by that because it was related to President Trump, right? And everything is different because of President Trump. And so Biden comes up with this proposal, which is now a bill introduced by Schumer, that would essentially try to, I think it's unconstitutional, overturn that Supreme Court decision by saying that presidents don't have any immunity for official acts, and then what it does, which is really dangerous, it actually tries to strip the Supreme Court of jurisdiction from hearing any cases in the future. And essentially what that's doing is telling lower courts, it's saying that presidents don't have jurisdiction, which is doesn't have any immunity, which is directly contrary to the Supreme Court holding. Okay, so it's really, really stunning that they would literally say, we're disagreeing with the Supreme Court. We're passing a law that says that, and now we're going to tell the Supreme Court or no other court that you can't rule on the constitutionality of this issue. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this in history. It would be like saying the Supreme Court, we don't like the Supreme Court's decision on guns, or we don't like the Supreme Court's decision, Second Amendment rights, or we don't like the Supreme Court decision on abortion not being in the Constitution. Whatever the issue is, Congress would come along and say, you don't have any jurisdiction over that, going forward. And we're going to make essentially the inferior courts, like the D.C. Circuit, their favorite court right now because it's stocked with a supermajority of liberals, as essentially the Supreme Court. So I think it's unconstitutional. I think it's a really dangerous harbinger of what's coming, of what the Democrats will do if Harris wins in the fall and the Democrats win the House and Senate. I do believe they would try and do this. I do think it's wildly bad and wildly unconstitutional. And I think that the Supreme Court, faced with something like that, would go ahead and say, you cannot strip us of jurisdiction on constitutional matters like this.
Very, very interesting. What would be an example of, give us an example of this immunity that the court says does exist, and that the Schumers of MSNBC, give me an example of them like totally freaking out about what immunity would be.
Sure. I mean, I actually think a president ordering a strike on an enemy combatant, and whether it's and people dying in it, and somebody suing the president, prosecuting the president for reckless. Maybe you could. People coming across the border, the president allowing tens of millions of people to come across the border, not enforcing our laws, and saying that somehow was a criminal conspiracy, or going out to Michigan to try and get votes and using your public office for private gain because you're trying to do it for re-election. I mean, all those things, if you say presidents don't have immunity, somebody, again, what's happened is, Mike, for over 200 years, we haven't had this thing. What's happened is this lawfare against the president has broken every norm that's existed in this country. So all of these sort of lawsuits against President Trump that are all drummed up, that even the left say wouldn't have been brought, except for the fact that he's our opponent in 2024, that's what will happen now in the future. And so you could come up with all sorts of lawsuits in different jurisdictions in the United States. Creative people could go to Texas and sue President Biden on the border for criminal conspiracy, or you name it. And that's the point, that we haven't done that. When the president's, we're not talking about, right? And the court didn't say that in private, if you're, lying on your application for a mortgage to buy a new home when you're president, and then it's found out then or after, you can get prosecuted for that. A president, okay? It's not taking away the fact that presidents in their private capacity have to are not above the law. They're not above the law, as the court says, as John Roberts explains. Right? It's the Constitution. It's within the law, as our Constitution has set it up. So that's my concern. But really, in terms of what the left has done, what they're doing with this No Kings Act, with the Supreme Court, again, I think your prior guest may have talked about the 18-year term limit. That's not just a term limit on future justices. That's a way to immediately replace Justice Thomas, Chief Justice Roberts, and Justice Alito almost right away. Like, it adds justices, but it takes away the most senior justice from active service. Okay, and so my view is this is actually absolutely. What happens with the 18? This is the lie. They know that. Look, term limits. I get it. Term limits are popular to the American people. Okay, I happen to think for the Supreme Court they should be there for life. But it doesn't poll well in terms of adding justices. So what they're talking about is term limits, okay, 18-year term limits. And I'll just say Biden, because he's so incapacitated, hasn't really, mentally incapacitated, hasn't spelled out his legislation, what he plans to do here. But it looks like it's Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's bill, okay? And what he does is he says, going forward, the president will appoint a justice every 2 years. Okay, and so you're adding it's going to be up to 18 justices total, right? But only 9 of them will have jurisdiction to sit on appellate jurisdiction cases. Okay, so that means that the minute a new justice is appointed, right, in the first year of the Harris administration, the most senior justice gets knocked out. He is essentially prohibited from sitting on appellate jurisdiction, which is 99.9% of the court's cases. So Justice Thomas would be immediately sidelined, okay? Then the next person up, if they do it the third year of Kamala Harris's presidency, if she wins, Chief Justice Roberts goes, okay? My view is that once the Democrats are doing this and playing games with the courts like this, they will just actually repeal that law. So they've just done a swap of 2 conservative for two ultra liberals. Okay, so this is not like term limits. This is court packing. This is replacing the people who have been ruling against the administration repeatedly. Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Chief Justice Roberts, particularly on the presidential immunity. Those are the first 3 people who would go. All right, this is not a term limits bill. Okay, this is a conservative justice replacement bill. That's what this is. And they're trying to control. Yeah, they're trying to control.
I want to make sure I get this right, because that's brilliant and so good. So if they add a new justice, let's say this bill passes and they add a new justice. First of all, wouldn't you have to change the Constitution? But if you add a new justice, what happens then to Clarence Thomas? He doesn't get kicked off the court, but he just can't rule on things? What does that say?
Correct. Yeah, it basically, I'll call it active service. So what happens is, what they think is this: there's this idea that the Congress can take away jurisdiction from the Supreme Court. Okay, my view is it's from the Supreme Court. I don't think they can do it like with the No Kings Act, but it's of the court generally. What they're trying to do is say, we're going to take away jurisdiction, appellate jurisdiction. Okay, and I'll just be, appellate jurisdiction is basically every case that comes to the Supreme Court. Original jurisdiction is essentially cases between states, okay, which are very, very rare, okay? So just think of just everything that comes before the Supreme Court is appellate. So they're now going to say that only the most recent 9 appointees, we're going to keep the court active justices at 9. We're just going to keep adding to it and taking the most senior justice off that. Because the Constitution, you would need a constitutional amendment to change to sort of take away life tenure. What they're saying is, Justice Thomas, you can stay on the Supreme Court, but you're only going to be allowed to sit on original jurisdiction cases. So we're going to let you serve for life. Okay, we don't need a constitutional amendment, but we're going to take away your jurisdiction to sit on appellate cases. So any case that comes before the Supreme Court. So Thomas is first, Roberts is next, and then Alito. Those 3 would immediately be knocked off, essentially. Okay, if this bill passes and they start doing this, and that's why it's not a good faith term limit thing. It's not going forward. It's trying to rig the court by taking off, it just so happens, right, that the 3 most senior justices are these conservative justices. And that's how they're packaging this. This is all a lie. This is literally all a lie as to what they're trying to do. So that's why it's important to understand this is about taking away the independence of the court, controlling the court's decisions. And my view, Mike, is once they accomplish that and they take out the first 2, right, they may just stop it right there and say, we're repealing this law. And just to be clear, what happens is it's up to 18 because it literally says once you hit 18, you stop appointing justices, okay? And so until the next vacancy happens and somebody rolls off, as a vacancy. So it's built with this way of not being a constitutional amendment because they know they can never do that. Just as a statute, they would get rid of the filibuster, okay, if they won in November. So when they opened up the new Congress in January 2025, Democrats would immediately get rid of the filibuster. They would pass this law. Kamala Harris would appoint a new justice right away, and immediately Justice Thomas would be decommissioned, essentially. Not sitting on a single case. Yeah.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Mark, no one is saying. I'm so grateful here. I hate we got to run. More to come on this shortly. Mark Paoletta, Senior Fellow at the Center for Renewing America. Mark, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Mike.
And that is so enlightening. But are you surprised? Are you surprised? No one should be surprised that they're doing the tricks. But that's a clever one. My point of this special is to bring this back into the conversation in this election. 2016, it was a prominent part of the conversation. I don't like Trump, but I'm going to vote for him because of the Supreme Court. Let's bring that back. Even if people don't like Trump, or if you do love Trump, but you need extra reason to get someone else needs some reason to get off the couch and actually go vote for him, the Supreme Court put this back in the conversation in America. Mike Slater on the First TV. Spread the word.